Hello, I'm Jack Carter. This is UK Pulse, cutting through the noise. Today, we're tackling what people are calling the Epstein Files, and more importantly, what those files actually reveal about Britain, our royals, our political class, our institutions, and above all, the survivors. This episode is serious and sensitive. Content warning. We will discuss sexual violence and exploitation. If that is upsetting for you, please pause now. The National Sexual Assault Helpline number is 0808 500 2222. I will repeat it later, and it is in the show notes. We are not here for gossip. This is about abuse, institutional failure, and whether people with power in Britain are held to account.
Thanks, Jack. I'm Dr. Aisha Rahman. I work as a criminologist and with survivors on institutional inquiries. I'll help separate what is verified from what remains unproven, and will keep victims' experiences at the center of this conversation. We'll also avoid using shorthand unless we define it, because clarity matters here.
Good. Let's start with the basics, the legal and document timeline. The Epstein Files Transparency Act was signed into law in November 2025. On January 30th, 2026, the law led to the publication of approximately 3.5 million pages of material. Emails, financial records, flight logs, FBI material, that's the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and DEA material, the Drug Enforcement Administration, plus roughly 2,000 videos and 180,000 images. That is the raw release that triggered this wave of reporting.
Right. And 3 critical points up front. 1. The FBI has said there is no single definitive client list in the files. 2. Being named in a document does not automatically mean a person committed a crime. And 3. The released material overwhelmingly shows patterns of elite networking, grooming, and institutional failure rather than a neat list of proven offenders.
Exactly. The UK press reacted in various ways. The BBC and The Guardian led with careful, sourced stories. Other outlets moved faster into speculation. One concrete harm from the release was shoddy redactions. Some victim names were exposed. That is not a minor detail. It further harms people who already suffered.
When redactions fail, survivors face renewed exposure and re-traumatization. Transparency is important, but it has to be done with survivor protective procedures in place. Otherwise, the very documents meant to promote accountability can re-traumatize people.
Let's take this step by step and focus on verified UK-related material. First big name, Prince Andrew. His name appears more frequently than any other British figure in the released documents. There are emails signed The Duke and sometimes a nickname recorded as the Invisible Man. The files show contact that continued after Epstein's 2008 conviction. They include invitations for Epstein to dine at royal premises, references to introductions, including an offer to introduce a 26-year-old Russian woman, and mentions of information relating to trade envoy trips between 2001 and 2011.
Listeners should understand what is alleged and what is proven. The files reference images described as showing Prince Andrew kneeling over a fully clothed, unidentified woman. Context for that image, who took it, when, and the circumstances, is not fully clear in the documents themselves. These descriptions are part of the record, but context matters for legal conclusions.
Right, the civil case brought by Virginia Giuffre, her 2022 settlement with Prince Andrew, and her long-standing allegations essential to public understanding. Prince Andrew has denied the allegations. Consequences we can confirm from the files and public records. In 2025, King Charles removed remaining royal patronages and titles from Prince Andrew. There has been pressure to remove him from royal properties. The Metropolitan Police Service, and I'll call that the Met from here on, has investigations underway into potential misconduct in public office and possible leaks of sensitive information. Around February 19, 2026, Andrew was arrested and released pending further inquiries. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has publicly urged full cooperation with US investigators.
From an investigatory point of view, an arrest and release pending further action is a procedural step that allows police to gather more evidence and interview witnesses. It's not a determination of guilt. But the fact that the Met took these steps shows they are treating the material seriously, and that has effects on public trust.
Public trust is key. Polling since January shows declining confidence in the monarchy amongst some segments of the public. People keep saying one rule for them, another for us. This goes to the heart of debates about what the royal family represents in a modern democracy. Now, another royal figure in the files, Sarah, Duchess of York, often called Fergie. The documents show a post-2008 email trail with affectionate language, such as "the brother I have always wished for" and "a legend." There are records of requests for money and assistance. One documented wire transfer in the files is for more than £150,000. Epstein drafted suggested statements for her, including the phrase, "I am not a pedo." She visited Epstein during his period of house arrest, and charities cut ties with her in 2026 as the material became public.
We must be careful to distinguish between unethical behavior and criminality. Accepting money or support from a convicted sex offender or socializing with them during or after their conviction raises moral questions and shows poor judgment, especially given familial public roles. But as it stands, the files do not prove that Sarah Ferguson committed criminal acts. That distinction is important for legal fairness and public debate.
And the reputational fallout is not trivial. It affects her daughters, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, and the charities associated with her. All right, moving to politics. Peter Mandelson appears in the files as having a close post-conviction relationship with Epstein. The documents include emails where he refers to Epstein with warmth, phrases like "my best pal." The files reference payments around $75,000, Epstein staying at Mandelson family properties, and handwritten notes that suggest an ongoing relationship. In early February 2026, Mandelson resigned from the Labour Party and from the House of Lords. On February 23, 2026, he was arrested by the Met on suspicion of misconduct in public office and released on bail.
This touches on how influence and access can operate. When a senior political figure retains social and financial ties with someone convicted of serious offences, it raises questions about conflict of interest and whether public office was used to facilitate private interests. Investigators will be looking for any official actions that might have been influenced by those ties, for example, hospitality, introductions, or use of public resources. Those are concrete lines of inquiry.
Listeners should also remember the role of Ghislaine Maxwell. She is British, the daughter of Robert Maxwell, and was convicted in 2021 for recruiting and abusing girls for Epstein. The released files add operational detail, more survivor testimonies, references to co-conspirators like Leslie Groff, and flight logs that include UK connections. Maxwell used her social networks and British background to introduce people into Epstein's orbit. That explains how UK social circles fed into the wider abuse network.
That social capital, status, connections, introductions, became operational for abusers. It was how victims were recruited and how the circle protected itself. Understanding that mechanism helps explain why institutions failed to stop them earlier. Elite networks provide a form of informal immunity.
Now, I want to recenter the discussion on survivors. The files contain many anonymized testimonies that describe a repeated pattern. Recruitment often involved promises of modeling work, job opportunities, or money. Vulnerability was exploited. Young women and girls who needed work, who were economically precarious, were offered travel, clothes, accommodation. Over time, the opportunities became sexualized. Many survivors described being told they would not be believed because of who the abusers were. I'm going to read a short paraphrase from one anonymized account in the files. She said she would help me with work. I was given clothes and a chance to go to New York. Later, I realized I was expected to be with men. I felt stuck. I had no money, and I was told that if I spoke, no one would help me. That theme, feeling stuck, is central across the files.
Thank you, Jack. That line captures both the economic coercion and the psychological control used by abusers. It explains why many survivors stayed silent for years. Fear, shame, economic dependency, and the impression that institutions protect elites rather than victims. The documents also show how the 2008 plea deal in the United States, which limited federal charges against Epstein, left many victims without redress for years. Activists and survivors campaigned for the transparency law precisely because earlier systems failed them.
On that point, the 2008 plea deal is a major grievance in the documents. The files show internal communications where prosecutors and others made choices that critics now argue amounted to two-tier justice. The transparency law and the massive release of documents are partly corrective, but disclosure alone is not justice. Legal accountability and systemic reform must follow.
So, what would meaningful accountability look like in the UK context? First, thorough and impartial criminal investigations, prosecutions where evidence supports them, and protection for witnesses. Second, a full, survivor-centred UK public inquiry that can compel testimony and documents. By survivor-centred, I mean an inquiry designed with trauma-informed processes, anonymity or restricted access where needed, legal and psychological support for witnesses, and legal aid so survivors can participate without financial ruin.
Concrete policy changes we should be asking for include stronger transparency and lobbying rules, tighter oversight of charities that accept large private donations, clearer guidance on who may use royal hospitality and how those interactions are recorded, and independent checks on public appointments that involve private patronage. Also, better vetting and reporting duties for people involved in placement or employment of vulnerable adults and children.
And frontline reforms. Better training to spot grooming. That means training for social workers, teachers, immigration and border officers, and health professionals in the National Health Service, which is the NHS, to recognise exploitation. Stronger mandatory reporting pathways with independent oversight are necessary. We must close the gaps that allowed exploitation to continue unnoticed or unaddressed.
A practical question people ask: what should I do if this material affects me or someone I know? First, if you are in immediate danger, call 999. If you or someone you know needs support and counselling, call the National Sexual Assault Helpline at 0808 800 8000. That number is in our show notes. If you are supporting a survivor, believe them, help them find specialist services, and avoid pushing them to relive detail before they are ready. There are survivor legal funds and charities also listed in the notes that can offer advice about civil claims.
Yes. And if you contact an organisation for help, ask about confidentiality and what support they will provide. If you are a professional working in a place of trust, document disclosures carefully and refer to specialist services. Remember, survivors should control the pace at which they engage with formal processes where possible.
One more question for you, Aisha. Does this represent a tipping point for Britain? Will the combination of documents and public outrage force sustained change?
Tipping points happen when public outrage, credible evidence, and institutional will align. Right now, we have public anger and a trove of credible documents. The missing piece is sustained political will to deliver reforms without letting partisanship stall progress. That requires pressure from voters, persistent investigative journalism, and survivor advocacy groups continuing to hold institutions to account.
Short answer, keep the pressure on. Quick-fire wrap-up. What should listeners ask their local members of Parliament? Ask whether they will support a full UK public inquiry into the files. Ask whether they will back reforms on transparency and charity oversight. And ask for action to expand survivor legal and financial support. Demand concrete timelines, not promises.
And also ask whether your MP will support tighter conflict of interest rules, mandatory reporting protections, and enhanced victim support services funded by the state. Those are measurable commitments.
We've covered a lot. To recap in plain terms, the Epstein Files release shows documented access and networking that implicated British elites, including members of the royal family and senior politicians. The files do not act as automatic proof of criminal guilt for every named individual, but they provide evidence that merits proper police investigation, possible prosecutions where evidence supports them, and institution-level reform. Disclosure is only step one. Justice and systemic change must follow.
And to survivors listening, your accounts matter. The law and documents help build a public record, but the system must be responsive and trauma-informed. That requires long-term commitment from courts, from government, and from civil society.
One final practical note. If this episode has been difficult for you, remember the helpline again. The National Sexual Assault Helpline 0808 500 2222. That number is also in the show notes with links to legal charities and survivor groups. If you want follow-ups from us, tell us what you need. We read all comments.
Thank you for listening, Jack. And to everyone tuning in, please take care. These stories are heavy, but speaking them aloud and seeking support are steps toward accountability.
Thanks, Aisha, and thank you, listeners. If this episode helped you cut through the noise, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. UK Pulse, cutting through the noise. See you next time.